was policy advisor to the main speaker of the House. He served on school board, planning board, and most recently state board of tax appeals appointed by Governor Page. We welcome him and thank you for moderating this evening.
Thank you. Good to be back in Lebanon. Thank you all for coming tonight. So what we've got going tonight is a public hearing on those things that will be on the ballot on June 10th. You've got a couple weeks to figure out how you're going to vote on these things. We're going to try to help you tonight make decisions about all of those things that you voted. So we have some rules. We'll try to follow the rules that are generally set down by the main moderator's manual, but this is not a town meeting, so we're not going to vote on anything tonight. We're just going to discuss these things. So what's fair game tonight? So questions are fair game. Questions about each article, each referendum that comes up. Questions can be, all the questions are going to come to me. Questions can be for the selectmen, they can be for the budget committee, they can be for the road commissioner who's here, or anybody else if you want to ask a question to, but the questions are going to be asked to me. We're going to give those folks, if they choose, a chance to answer the question. Now, we all know that there may not be an answer to some questions. For whatever reason that may be forthcoming. So just because you ask a question doesn't mean there's an answer to it. But we're going to try to answer your questions, obviously. Also, you may want to advocate for a referendum like that. That means urge other people to vote for or vote against it. That's fair game tonight. So if that's what you choose to do, you're welcome to do that. However, having said that, once an item has been said once or twice, probably isn't going to do you any good to say it 3 times, or 4, or 15 times. So once something has been said, it's probably, at least the second time, that's probably enough. If it gets repetitive, I'm probably going to intervene, so we can move this along. So our job tonight is to make sure everybody has a chance to speak, say what they want to say, and for everybody else to listen, and share whatever information comes up. So, I think that's pretty much it. Now, we have a couple of things happening here that we don't have at town meeting. One, we may have non-residents here. There's been no attempt to sort that out or identify anybody. So when you stand up and ask a question, if you can tell us who you are, your name, and whether you're a resident or not, that would probably be helpful. Helpful for the order tonight. Okay, I think that's it. Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to try to, so if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll try to recognize people as I see them. If you're of a mind to shout out something, I'm probably not going to recognize you until you get your hand up in the air, and we'll recognize you if you ever go to a chance to talk. Moving on. First referendum question is referendum 1. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to adopt the revised mass gathering ordinance? A copy of the ordinance is available from the town clerk. There's some on the table over here.
That's the issue. That's one issue.
Wait a minute. Okay, apparently I'm working off the wrong sheet here.
Yep.
So we're going to go back to the ballot.
There is a separate ballot for a liquor question, so we wanted to take care of that first and then get to the ballot.
Okay, so apparently we're going to do the liquor question first. So the question is, this is referendum 1. I got a couple of referendum ones here. We'll start out with this one. Sale of liquor for consumption on the premises on Sunday. Shall this municipality authorize the state to issue license for the sale of liquor to be consumed on the premises of licensed establishments on Sunday? Yes or no? There are questions or comments on this? Yes, ma'am.
They're already serving it Monday through Saturday.
You can stand up, everybody can.
They're already serving it Monday through Saturday. I don't quite understand why Sunday it shouldn't be allowed.
Great. Other questions or comments on referendum 1? Okay. It's easy. All right, now we're going back to what I thought was the order. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to adopt a revised mass gathering ordinance? A copy of the ordinance is available here. Saw some as you came in. Are there questions about the mass gathering ordinance? Or comments? Yes, right here. Guy in front here first.
I'd like to know why the town is proposing the changes. What prompted us to be here with this?
Question about the changes. Why are we doing this? Anybody can address that here?
My name's Mike, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Originally, and remind me if I'm wrong, Sergeant Jonathan Shapiro had asked for a copy of our ordinance that we had, and it was 30 plus years old, suggested updates, revisions to it, sat down with us. I think it was September, it was definitely last fall, late summer, and we looked at it, at length. We sat down with Skydive New England while we worked on that. But originally the idea was that it was so old, 30 plus years old, needed looking at, and that was originally brought forth to us from the Maine State Police.
Other comments or questions? Somebody in front here? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
There are only two businesses in town that trip the mass gathering ordinance. Ours.
There's actually one. There's actually one business.
One at a time.
Trip the ordinance.
Okay, all right. We have tripped the ordinance, and we've always applied for the mass gathering permit, whether we needed it or not. That is on record, that we've always applied for it. This mass gathering ordinance will put us out of business. End of story. That is it. We cannot afford what you want for police coverage, what you want for traffic coverage. You're saying for 300 people, you want someone out there to direct traffic? And you want one police officer for every 50 people on the property? At what, $30 an hour? Anyone
Listen,
know?
please talk to me.
I'm sorry. Okay, no, I'm just,
I know you're
I don't know
talking
if
to
they
me,
can
you're
hear me.
communicating with everybody.
Yep, I don't know if they can hear me.
Well,
Just saying, it's very upsetting to us that you tried this again. We already voted on this in November, and it was defeated almost 3-1. And now it's brought up again. And again, you've got referendum 1 for the bar. This is also referendum 1. Talk about confusing. Someone's going to say, oh, let's vote yes to having liquor in the bar, but let's vote no to the mass gathering permit. But they're both referendum 1.
okay, so I think that was a question. That's that we would choose to answer something.
The reason that the liquor question was question 1 is because it has to be on a state ballot by itself.
Yep.
We couldn't make it number 7, it's a single question.
Right. But you couldn't make us number 3, number 2, number 5.
I honestly, there was no thought to that.
I don't
We knew
believe that.
if I could finish, we knew that we wanted the ordinance at the top of the ballot. I suppose we could have put shoreline zoning at the top. There was no thought to that at all. And with regards to the traffic comment, there have been issues, according to the Maine State Police, with exiting traffic from your events.
We've talked to Sergeant Shapiro.
Oh, wait a minute. Do you have additional comments or questions?
We
Okay,
have
go
talked
ahead.
to Sergeant Shapiro on several occasions, and he has never brought up an issue of traffic, ever. Am I correct?
You have the emails.
No, not once. But I'm just saying, it's going to put us out of business.
Other comments or questions on question 1, mass gathering ordinance? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to bring up a scenario that, in regards to the 50 people, I mean, if I went to a wedding, a moderate-sized wedding with 150 people, do you think all your guests would be completely comfortable if it was 3 or 4 uniform officers in the room at the whole time? I don't, I just, that'd be a bit much.
Question, does anybody want to address that? Okay. Addition? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Why are we voting on it again?
Okay, the question is, why are we voting again? Does anybody know the answer to that? Because it was voted in November, is that what you're suggesting?
I feel that we're voting on it again because the Maine State Police have brought the issue forward that it needed to be updated.
I'll also address that, and I'll go back to your original question as well. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever read Title 32 of Maine State Law, 9401? As I mentioned to Kurt back That has nothing to do with police coverage. It has everything to do with the Private Security Act's $35 fee that applies to the state. You hire your own employees or whoever you want to act as security. Go read the law.
Go ahead, stand up.
Okay, yes, sir. Comment or question on that mass gathering ordinance?
We did talk about this.
Yep.
If you want to buy a new car,
No, address
if
me.
you want to buy a new car, you can go out and mine iron, and you can make the car. You want me to become an accredited, what is it, security firm?
It's a simple license. It's not-
You mentioned that Fred Cottrell hired Zimmerman and Zimmerman. I talked to
Actually,
Fred,
I didn't know that. So.
huh?
I didn't mention that, but I don't
We can't have a
know.
dialogue, though. Let him ask the question, and then we'll...
He had hired a private security firm. I called up Fred, we talked. It's $30 an hour. To trip the mass gathering ordinance, I need 6 guards there, if you will, security people. It's not as easy as you think. You paint cars for a living. I couldn't do it. It's not as easy as you make it seem. My name is Kurt Zeller. I'm the person that is going to put me out of business. Why? Because I need to get back to 1,000 attendees at our events to make this profitable, to make it work. That means I have to hire 20 security guards. We have $1 million worth of liability each and every we buy event insurance. God help you if you want to have an event. You're going to have to buy $1 million policy. If we want to have a going away party for Karen, we couldn't do it. We'd have to hire 6 security guards. We'd have to buy $1 million policy. Personally, I can't believe it. When I moved my business here, just Chevy trucks years ago, there was me and 2 guys. We were in the old D&D. We've cleaned that up. We bought that. We bought the building we're in. We now have 10 employees. I feel betrayed by the town. What?
Okay, additional comments on mass gathering. Anybody else want to address the mass gathering? Yes, sir. Identify yourself, please.
Chuck Butler, I live right in town. Is Officer Shapiro the only opinion we got?
Question on whether the sergeant, say police sergeant, is anything?
He met with us. He is the supervisor that oversees the troopers here in town, and he sat with us to discuss initially plans, I think. Again, when we were doing the revisions, there were representatives in the room from Skydive New England, and we took their opinions as well.
Additional question?
Yes. You said you met with Skydive. They've never tripped the ordinance. Have you sat and wanted to talk to Kurt and Brenda?
No.
We announce all of our meetings publicly online, and the agenda is posted. We didn't call Skydive and ask them to come. They saw the agenda, they came, and it was quite a lengthy meeting. We sat for hours working on revisions and taking their input.
Additional question? Yes, sir.
I just don't think that there's been enough thought put into this. That's all.
Other questions on mass gathering? Let's let this young lady talk. She has something. Yes, ma'am.
My question really is, I look at this whole mass gathering ordinance, and I really feel like with all the business that is brought into town, from, Skydive and just Chevy, the mud races and everything, why make it so difficult? It is making it nearly impossible for them. They will go out of business. Is there no other way that we could work with people that could have made this any easier? I understand that there's laws, but I feel like there's a lot of things that were maybe a little overdone on the ordinance that didn't really need to be done that way, that really could have helped them out and maybe even saved them if this doesn't go the right way.
Okay, I think that was a question. If anybody chooses to weigh in more on what we said. Yes, yes, sir.
Chip Barlow, I'm a resident. I hear this and I ask, it sounds like we've really only got 2 businesses in town that might hit that gathering ordinance, and I don't know why. It's a small town. This isn't a city. There's a phone call, hey, we're having a meeting, come on over. When can we set it up? If you've at least tried and they don't show up, that's a different story. But at least make a couple of proactive calls to the businesses, have them all sit in a room. I understand the urinals nowadays are different than the urinals 30 years ago, so we can update those, and I bet you everybody would agree with that one. So, we could have had common ground here instead of not involving those and then having the issue that we have now. Last November it was voted on, partly possibly because people didn't know what was going on, but my guess is the vote's probably not going to change this time.
Additional comments on mass gathering? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, White House. Why are we voting on this again?
Good question. The selectmen have, my understanding, the selectmen have put it on the ballot again for reasons which have already been stated.
Doesn't the town decide this? The voters in town decide this?
They do. You're going to get a chance on June
Did we
10th.
decide this in November? They tried to slide it through last time in November.
Wait.
We found out
Address
about it
it,
from our
address it.
trash guy, that this was going down a few days before it happened. Kurt brought around residents of town. Why would they be knowing that there was going to be a vote on something like that pertaining to their business? And one of you guys did notify them, knowing full well they're one of the few businesses in town that this would affect. The town is the one that voted, and we said no. Why are we voting again?
Okay, question that can be answered or not, I guess that's it. Thank you. Other questions or comments on mass gathering? Yes, ma'am.
I think the town knew that we were the only ones that had tricked this.
No, they didn't.
Well, okay. We applied and all of that, but we didn't get one phone call, not one email. We work 7 days a week. We pay taxes to the town of Lebanon. Granted, we do not live here. We pay a ton of taxes. No one could have picked up the phone and just made a phone call. Hey, look, why don't you come sit down with us? We want to discuss this mass gathering permit. Not a problem. We'll be right over. We got nothing. Nothing. $20,000 in taxes a year. We get nothing.
Additional questions or comments on mass gathering? Don't forget, you're all going to get a chance to vote on June 10th on this. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dolores Boyersmith. I'm a resident. I just would like to ask the people on this side who've been asking questions to identify themselves because I haven't.
I asked for that. So the folks here are owners of the business, non-residents, I think it's become clear, but
Taxpayers.
taxpayers.
Definitely.
Other comments or questions on mass gathering? Thank you all. Question 2, represent will town of Lebanon vote to amend the shoreline zoning ordinance? Copy of the ordinance is available on the table. Are there comments or questions on the new shoreline zoning changes? Yes, sir.
I'm Gary Getchell. I'm a resident and vice chair of the planning board, which in Lebanon administers the shoreline ordinance. It's a little different ordinance than most of the rest that we have in that it's fully state mandated. We have no choice of having the ordinance and enforcing it. And our version of it is pretty much the state minimum. So nobody likes being told what they can do with land, so that's why we have it to begin with, and we haven't got any choice with doing what the legislature has decided we need to do. This change, the $50 fee is not new. That is correcting a typo on the original ordinance. If anybody's worried about that, if you look at the application sheet that's part of the ordinance, it states this fee, but nobody entered it in the text of the ordinance, which is necessary to validate it being paid and collected. So that's just housekeeping. The other part, the town attorney, when he reviewed that, all the long sentences. What those basically do is provide that an applicant for something that is covered by the shoreline zoning ordinance. Again, it's mandated. The planning board didn't invent it, and we just review it. That's all we do. We don't enforce it. And we review it. It's a difference. And in many cases, that takes, or could take, a lot of expert opinion to assess the environmental issues and the engineering issues if somebody had something substantial. As the ordinance currently exists, there's no provision in it for the property owner to pay all those fees to be able to proceed with their project under state law. And in the subdivision ordinance, which is the other thing we do for comparison's sake, It's all laid out, it's been in there for 30 years if you want to do something, and it's going to require outside expert review because we're all laymen doing the best we can to figure out what it says. They have to put up money to pay for that. Now, the alternative to putting up these escrow accounts is for the town to foot the bill, period, and it would require the planning board's budget to go up to cover that. So this basically makes it a user fee so that to cover compliance with state law, basically, for these projects. And it's long, it's complicated, we don't tend to like those things, but the alternative, it has to be done. The town is obligated to do these enforcements and reviews, and without the escrow accounts from the applicant, it has to go on the tax basis to pay it. So this makes it a user fee instead of general tax. And that's the idea of it.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on referendum item 2, the shoreline zoning change? No additional comments or questions. Thank you. Item 3, shall the town of Lebanon vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to expend the following amounts from departmental budgets for fiscal year 2013-14 for a total sum of $93,140 to pay down the Lebanon rescue deficit. And there's a whole list of things which I'm not going to read. The totals at the bottom. The Selectmen's recommendation, budget committee recommendation there. Are there comments or questions on item 3? Seeing none, moving on. Item 4. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to expend $104,413 from FEMA FEMA funds to apply toward the rescue deficit? The Selectmen's recommendation is there, and the budget committee recommendation. Are there comments or questions on item 4? Referendum item 4. Yes, sir.
Dan Roy, I live here in Lebanon. Now, if you add those two up together, it comes up to $197,500. I think the rescue problem we had was $200,000, so did we only collect $3,000? So what was owed from rescue, and we have to come up, the taxpayers have to come up with the rest of this money?
Okay, question on rescue?
Since this came about, monies have come in from the original deficit, which was over $200,000. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we are at $196, $293.96. Right. So, do you want to speak to it, Ben?
I believe, well, all I was going to add was I think that the original number, you're saying over 200, around 216, so that shows you some revenue has come in. It obviously needs to be booked with the old account. You know, for accounting reasons, we split the department into Department 98, which it always was, that's old rescue, and new rescue is Department 97. So going forward, rescue will be Department 97, and this hopefully will be buried. Really kill the old one, you know what I mean, start fresh by that. I don't know if you have a follow-up question.
Well, it seems like they still owe, past regime still owes a lot of money. Are we still, you still going to try to go after that money, or this is going to be the end of it?
Additional questions on the rescue? Go ahead.
I want to make it very clear right off the bat, this is not missing money. Not, every dollar, every penny has been accounted for, it's just misspent money. Overexpent and misspent, it's not missing.
Okay.
Additional questions?
Another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Are we going after that?
In every direction we can.
Additional questions on item 4? Yes? Yes, sir.
Sorry, I have a question on 3. Is that the correct year, 2013?
So we're backing up a little bit on 3, and I have a question on the year that's stated, 2013-14.
Our current year right now.
Okay, this is for next year.
This is next year's budget, right?
No, actually.
Sorry.
2013-14 is the year we're in. And accrue it from this current fiscal year, so that there isn't an additional appropriation.
Okay, we got some questions here. Questions looked, I guess. Anybody want to add to that explanation? So, other questions on item 4? Further questions? Yes, sir.
Just a question about what year FEMA money was this? Did we just get this in, or where did this FEMA money come from?
Yes, go ahead.
I can answer that. I mean, as best we can track now with the auditor was around February 2011. So this is money that's been sitting there for a couple of years. To clarify some other rumors that have been online as well. I mean, this is money that wasn't designated necessarily for highways. It wasn't designated for a specific place. Originally, it may have been, obviously. But when FEMA monies come in, if they come in that same fiscal year, then obviously there would be a reimbursement to that department. If they come in a different fiscal year, money doesn't carry over to the department. So it gets suspended, if you will, and it gets earmarked as FEMA money. But it needs to be then voted, because it's the people's money, it's a reimbursement back for taxes. It needs to be voted back to go into the fund balance or be reappropriated someplace else. So that is what we're asking you to do now, or requesting, if that's what you guys want, is to reappropriate these FEMA monies that have been hanging there for a couple of years that should have been realistically, to help alleviate some of this debt.
Additional question? Yes, sir.
Is there any kind of maybe, do we have policies or procedures in place so FEMA money just generalized thinking is that we have a storm, we have damage, the road department has to go out and fix all that damage, that's money out of their current budget that they can't now use to tar XYZ road, so they do that, they don't get reimbursed yet, the following year they get reimbursed, but yet that XYZ road still hasn't been repaid. Is there any procedure, rather than having this money sit there for 3 years or 4 years, to make sure that comes forward? Because us as townspeople don't know when we get a big check at the town hall of FEMA. We haven't got a clue. So how do we know that there's a couple $100,000 sitting on the sideline that's basically a slush fund that can be used whenever we need to dig into money? It's kind of good that we do for this, but that's kind of my general question.
I can't speak to policy or procedure. I can only speak to my first year in. The auditors brought forth to our attention, my first year's board in 2011, that there was over $400,000 in FEMA, and suggested that we do just that. And we did take, I don't know, Larry, we take $200,000 that year and put it toward $202,000 off that, and we paid with it. But as far as policy, I don't know of one.
Additional questions on item 4? Yes, sir.
Yeah, first, I'm a resident. Why are we responsible for the debt of the rescue squad if we voted funds aren't supposed to go towards it?
Question on the debt of the rescue squad. Is there an answer?
I get into that. Town debt, rescue is not a private corporation. It's not, they had a corporation, started out as a volunteer department. So therefore, to do fundraising, to raise money, they had to have a corporation. 2010, this town voted to make it a town department. It's therefore now a town department, just like every other department. So it shows up as debt on the town books. So, it's up to you people if you want to, what do you want to do? We've done a lot of hours trying to figure out what to do ourselves. And it's not this board. I want to say it's every department in this town. I mean, they've all agreed to set back a certain amount of money to help alleviate this debt. If it doesn't pass, one thing that I think that's kind of where you're headed to is if it doesn't pass, that's up to you voters. But that leaves a negative on our books and basically affects any loans that we go after, affects the interest rate that the town goes after. So it still shows up as a negative. If hit from January, February, you know, and each month was getting better as we got things straightened out, so we should do pretty good, I think, for about a year.
Additional questions on 4? Yes, ma'am.
How did it get so out
Continuing questions on rescue.
One sample of how it did was under mismanagement, and back in December, the board met at length with the ambulance billing service Comstar, and that was when we became aware of several, at least 9 different situations of mismanagement. An example of one of them was they were billing approximately 200% less than other municipalities in York County. Did the select board know that? No, we did not. And like I said, that's one of several issues, which is, in my opinion, how we get there.
Additional question? Yes, ma'am.
Is there going to be oversight, or why was there no oversight? Or I'm not grasping how it got so.
As soon as Selectman Thompson and I became aware of it, huge oversight went into gear. We found out about it, we inquired with Jeanette LeMay back in October as to how's rescue doing, how are things financially, we want to see a report. And she came in shortly thereafter and had bad news. And originally the figure was $65,000 in arrears, and then it grew and it grew, and the more she dug, the more we learned. And then that was October. By December, we were meeting with Comstar, speaking with them, finding out about all these things that weren't being done. And Ben already spoke to tons of hours, long late nights. So we've spent it there cleaning up, fixing, dealing with the issues, and a lot has been rectified. And I know you want to.
Additional question? Go ahead.
I just think I wanted to
How
add that.
about this being authorized, though? I mean, didn't anybody at any time ever say, I mean, how do these bills get authorized to get paid? I mean, how did, it just seems like something is missing somewhere. Huge, is it getting it?
Speaking for myself, my first year in, I had concerns about rescue. I pushed for the chairman at that time, I think it was December of 2011, to have a meeting with the auditor and rescue. At the time, let me just explain this. The treasurer said to us last week that this was one journal entry, this deficit, that the board wouldn't see. It was one journal entry in the books. We're seeing the checking account, we're signing on checking reconciliation, but we wouldn't have seen something like this. However, that said, twice in my first 2 years in office, I had the auditor come before the budget committee. I had the same concerns they had from my previous year on budget committee. I felt like the spending was more than what they were bringing in. Did I think it was $200,000 worth? No. I just didn't think things were right. Each time he went before the budget committee, things were plodded over, pacified.
Wait a minute.
I think Selectman Thompson wanted to chime in, so.
Yeah, to answer kind of your 2 last questions kind of fall together. You can remember too, this is something I sat back for the last 5 years and watched happen on Facebook, kept quiet, and I don't answer back on Facebook, but you can see what's going on, the baloney that's out there, and saw a problem, which caused me to want to throw my hat in the ring and run. No sane person would want to do this job, I'm joking, but you got to remember, there was a lack of oversight, absolutely, but that goes hand in hand with conflict of interest that this town held at the time. Okay?
Wait a minute. Let him answer, please, okay?
Very readily identified that you had an assistant chief acting as chief, as well as being selected. So a lot of things were held very close to the vest. The whole department was held very close to the vest. And I know once I got on, we started asking some pretty poignant questions, as far as that goes. The other part of it, I think, goes to, without getting into previous treasurers, principal of that ambulance payment, $170,000 got booked for their expense line in 2010. So when you look at this, you see $348,000 spent. That's because the ambulance payment's on there. However, if you follow down through, every year, it was always overspending what their actual revenue was. And just in conversations that we've had over and over, since I got in, it was stated that they could spend their receivables. No. If I put out a bill, if you come pay me for a job or something like that, it's money in my hand, that's revenue. If I put a bill up to you and haven't collected yet, it's a receivable. And I don't spend on what I don't have, that was happening.
Additional questions on item 4? Yes, ma'am. You're up.
I'm a resident. So my question for you guys is like, if we have no say in who's part of the new rescue as like the town, we can't decide that. It's your job to keep us from having to deal with this debt. What do you guys have planned for that? Because it's not fair to the town to have to deal with debt from a rescue department that yes, we have pushed forward to be like a corporation, but we have no say in who's involved with it or what they're doing. We need advocacy. What are you guys going to do for us to avoid this debt in the future?
Anybody answer the question?
Policies to be put in place. Absolutely, throughout the whole town, not just this department. There's a lot of loose ends in this now. And I'll say, go backwards for a minute, but mass gathering may not be the right answer right now, but there are issues there as well. We're trying to tie up some of these ends, maybe it's not right now, and the actual, everything is sweet, but there's loose ends there, there's loose ends throughout the whole town that needs policy in place. And not only there's policy, we got a ton of policy, but there's no consequence following behind it.
Additional questions on 4? First, the guy at the end, and then this gentleman. That's you. Thank you.
It's a quick question. We just finally revealed that we had a huge conflict of interest, which is one of the problems we got into this problem. It took a while to get that out. Thankfully, we got it out. But my question is, and it's not really with the referendum, but it's going forward, we've identified a huge issue. What is being done to prevent that from happening in future years? It doesn't sound like we have any conflict of interest policy, so this could very easily happen this coming year, the next year, after Ben's gone, after Karen's gone. What's to prevent and to help us, taxpayers, from having to deal with this in the future?
I think that's a question for the selectmen, if I can answer.
The selectmen, the future selectmen can absolutely put that question to the voters, and it did go to the voters, I believe, in 2011, June of 2011, and was voted down by the town. But by all means, it could go on ballot again.
Additional questions on 4? Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
I just got a comment. I've been on this budget committee for too long, and seriously, we questioned the rescue department years ago about overspending, way in debt, and we had, like the ambulance, the first ambulance the town bought, we questioned that. The town voted on it. It was 6 payments, and we had the auditor come to the budget committee, and it ended up that we paid 7 payments. That we got, one more payment on it, I think, and then we own that. This is for the second ambulance, I'm sorry. So we asked the auditor, well, how can the rescue department change that ballot question from six payments to 7 payments after the town voted for 6 payments? So, in 2 or 3 years, there was a deficit in the rescue department. So we asked the auditor to come see us. The selectmen brought him to a meeting. Me personally, I sat there and I asked him probably 20 questions. He never wrote one of them down. He said he's got it in his head and he'll get back to us. Well, guess what? He never got back to us. So, and like I say, like 2 weeks before the meeting with the auditor, there was a deficit. Yet when he showed up at the meeting, it was even. There was no debt at all. So I think the auditor and the rescue department's at fault here. You can't blame the selectmen because the auditor, that's his job, is to check the books. So if he's saying there's not a deficit there, how's the selectman going to know that they're $200,000 in debt? Like I say, I've been on here and I've seen this with the rescue department, how much they're spending, how much they're in the hole, and then he would come before us, we'd ask him the questions, and everything was, it's a clear book. How can you run a business like that?
Additional questions on item 4 or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Just saying that
One was the referendum for town manager that was voted down, and one was the referendum for conflict of interest, which was voted down. And if we had either one of those, this would have been picked up long before it was.
I'd like to also just add, as far as the conflict of interest, if I could, since I got in, absolutely, this has been being looked at. I don't want anybody thinking that, oh, we turned a blind eye or whatever. This has absolutely been looked at. The issue you have was a second in charge and a select person, as far as titles went. That becomes an issue. Now you have to prove acting. Now you have to prove acting number one person, chief, whatever position they want to hold. Yeah, absolutely, that's a conflict, is a conflict. But that's not really what we had. You had the marriage thing, the husband-wife thing as well. But I mean, as far as talking with the legal counsel, it was quite an undertaking. It still is an undertaking. It's not as easy as just throwing something simple on the ballot. We're researching it so that it's something that's going to stick and solid.
Additional questions on item 4? Comments? Seeing none. Question on auditor.
The auditing is out to bid at this time.
Yes, sir.
So you started questioning in 2011, and questioning the auditors, and it took until October of 13 before we find out there's a problem. And we're just now putting an auditor up to date. I mean, I understand it. From what he's saying, the auditor made it look like everything was hunky-dory, but if you knew it was wrong, if you guys all knew it was wrong, for 2 years, 2.5 years, you didn't think to maybe get a second auditor in here and have a look at something before we get $200,000 in the hole?
Okay, now we're getting to, we're making statements now that are not going to be helpful to voting on this thing. So you're actually free to do that, but questions to the selectmen would be more specific. It might be more helpful.
The question is,
Redoing history isn't going to be real helpful. So,
why did it take 2.5 years for us to figure this out?
okay, that's a better question.
Well, looking back, we're on our third treasurer, and like Ben said, she's wonderful and doing a great job. I was reliant upon 2 other treasurers who, that was their job. Went to them, brought forth my concerns. I didn't know there was an issue. I had a feeling there were problems. Brought them to the chairman when I was in my first 2 years, brought them to the auditor, brought the auditor to the budget committee twice. And if I have treasurers and auditors telling me that things are okay, I'm not making an excuse. I'm an elementary school teacher, I'm not an auditor, I'm not an accountant. And again, last week, Jeanette, our treasurer, said that it was a single entry in the books, a journal entry and transfer that a select board wouldn't have seen.
170K. Wait.
Okay. We can make accusations, we can go deeper into this, we can go deeper into this hole, but it's going to be helpful to make it for you to vote, for you to vote on June 10th, We're getting deeper into this hole, it's not going to be helpful.
No, yeah, the question was that the entry for the ambulance, that was the one that got overlooked, $170,000.
No, that wasn't the only one. I'm saying that helped to push that to 348,000. They obviously, when you subtract that 170 off there, they're still spending quite a lot of money. Still going back to their receivables. You got to also understand ambulance billing, which this has been the ambulance billing 101 for me.
Well, I was confused because it said it was a single entry.
Yeah. No, I understand. Okay.
So a single entry of $348,000 to go below.
No, it wasn't a single entry. This was the ambulance itself for 170 would have been booked that way. Yes.
All right, other questions or comments on item 4? We're all going to get a chance to vote on June 10th. Nancy.
Hi, Nancy Newburgh. I'd just like to say that it wasn't until we got this previous board that anything was able to be done. Budget committee is a recommendation committee only. We really don't have any power. We go over the books, we see the numbers not making sense, we ask them, goes to the selectmen, and then it's in their hands. And every year for the past several years, we have had questions, and it was not until last fall, we had a board that could do something about it. If you haven't been in town for the past few years, we had a selectman who was a rescue person, and it was a huge conflict of interest. So, I know you wanted the answers, you want to know why, and why didn't you pick this up? We finally have a select board that's willing to fix problems. And they have put in thousands of hours to try to fix this. And I feel really bad that you guys are kind of jumping on them a little bit, because I know how much time they put into it. And any suggestion that the Budget Committee has had this year, they have bent over backwards to get us information and to answer our questions. So I just want to, applaud the Select Board for finally,
Other comments or questions on item 4? Good, thank you. Item 5, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate a subsidy of $40,000 for the Lebanon Rescue Department? Said subsidy to be administered by the Board of Selectmen for operational expenditures. You can see the recommendations there. Are there questions or comments on item 5? Yes, ma'am.
Karina Cole, I'm a resident. I am wondering, with all the issues that you've had with rescue and fire, I know there's been a lot of things, have you ever considered combining the two departments?
Question about combining rescue and fire?
Yeah. So a lot of towns have fire and rescue as one department. And why was it ever divided? Does everyone know that?
Yeah, the conversations have been had, it actually started divided. They were combined at one point, and then of course, obviously they're divided again. To answer your question, pretty straightforward right now, why would you want to hang a dead albatross around somebody else's neck? We need to fix this first, Future conversations, yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot more complicated than just saying, okay, you guys can put together as well. The legalities of how what departments are right now, volunteer or municipal, how those get put together. We sometimes take on the fire or municipal department, itself. It's a bigger task than just a simple saying, to do it right, which is where I think we go.
Additional questions or comments on item 5?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman in the hat first, yes.
All this is doing, if we vote yes on this, is to continue the enterprise account. We just told you why we shouldn't have that enterprise account. Like I said, I've been on this budget committee for years, and at the end of it, when the rescue department was supposed to come to the budget committee, they tell us it's a courtesy, because we don't have to know what's going on, because it's an enterprise account. And that was allowed for years because of the board of selectmen that we had. These guys here are the best board we've had in a long time in this town. Me personally, I think it's the best we've had. And I've lived here my whole life. I'm 50 years old. So, to vote to do this, we're just doing the same thing that we just got done doing. These guys here aren't going to be selecting forever. We might get back in the same situation again, so why not? Get rid of the enterprise account, give them a budget, just like we do our fire department, highway department. We know what we're going to be spending. When the revenue comes in, that goes back into the general fund to pay their budget. So, to me, I think, personally, I voted no for it. Because I think we're just going to start going on the gerbil wheel again. That's all we're going to do. Go right back on what we just got off. That's my opinion. That's why I voted no.
Additional comments? I think the gentleman at the end that was next in line. Yes, sir.
Chris was going to say that much junior. I'm going to argue with him. The enterprise account is an accounting thing that was misrepresented to the town, to the budget committee, even to the selectmen on what it's used for. Its primary use is for a department that has significant revenue. So the Sanford Sewer Department has an enterprise account. It doesn't mean they don't have a budget. It doesn't mean their budget doesn't have to go through the town. It's just that they've got significant revenue. Same thing with rescue. Rescue has significant revenue. The enterprise account was to segregate it, to make it so you could keep an eye on it. Guess what? Nobody kept an eye on it. So it wasn't managed correctly and all that. But the enterprise account itself is actually a good thing in my mind. It just was not. It was misrepresented to to the townspeople, to the selectmen on how to use it. The 40,000 is just, as Selectman Thompson mentioned, you got a department that started the year with a zero balance. They've got no money. This is to give them something from seed capital so they can get up and running, start getting the calls in, start getting the revenues in to pay for themselves. My guess is in a year from now, if this passes, come next year, or leading up to next year, there's going to be an evaluation of rescue. Can rescue be self-sufficient? If they can't be, then what do we do with it? It's too early right now. It's only been a few months. It's too early to figure that out. You got to give it some time to see if they can get back up and running and be self-sufficient. If they can't, then very well, next year it might get dissolved. But you got to give them a fighting chance, and I think that's what this 40,000 does. It gives them a fighting chance to make a go of it. And then the following year will be when we decide whether they're going to do that.
I think Dr. Thompson has some comments on this.
I'd like to clarify too as well. This is not a vote whether you're keeping the enterprise account or not. That was a vote taken by the select board. The enterprise account is staying for the next year. This is a vote asking you to, if you want to subsidize that account for $40,000. My concern, our concern, going forward, is we've committed to an ambulance payment. And as Mr. Gilpatrick has identified, I feel the wool was pulled over our eye. We voted in for a certain number of years, and it was extended out to an additional years. So I thought going into this next coming year was one more ambulance payment. I was trying to do a budget so we can cut them down a little bit so we could nurse our way through, if you would, and get through this next coming year. I got 2 more ambulance payments looking at us. So that's why this subsidy is there. This subsidy will help pay that ambulance payment. This whole issue started because it's not that it can't be done, but it's really almost illegal. It's illegal, I guess would be the right word to use. You should not be taking tax appropriated money and putting it into an enterprise account. That's what was happening. Okay? But all day long, you can take from an enterprise account and put back into the tax appropriation. So let's just, if rescue, it's a big if right now, and that's why right now you need some time to be able to do this. So I say a year from now, we're going to tell you exactly where we stand. Yeah, definitely, we would look at the enterprise account again. But we may end up with additional funds there that could pay it back. If that's possible, we could pay that $40,000 back, then you could, and would. As long as I felt the department's going to stay strong at that point, I don't want to cripple them either, you know what I mean? But right now, I'm looking at this as a one-year subsidy, not ongoing, we'll address it again next year. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, if I could, if everybody has his handout on the Lebanon Rescue Department, the fiscal, the financial, on the last page, it talks about the summary. It breaks down the number on top, over to the general fund, $196,293. If this passes on referendum 3 and 4, so we could actually clean up this account, we would actually end up with where it says total receivables. This is already been figured in with a disposition. So if we got everything that is coming into that department, like I say, it's already figured in the 40% disposition rate, we would actually be in that department when everything comes in at $71,000 right now in the positive. If this negative does not get voted through, then that department, as they stand right now with all the receivables and whatnot, will be in a negative of 1.4. So that's just one more example of why we've set this money aside. There is money there. It's not going to cost you more money than you've already appropriated as taxpayers. It'll help clean up that debt, is what I'm saying, and it'll help to get the rest of the department back going here.
Additional questions on 5, yes, ma'am.
I just want to remind everyone that this enterprise account we're talking about was voted on by the town, and the town voted to give them the enterprise account several years back. And I happen to agree with Mr. Harlow that I don't think it's the account that's the problem.
Additional questions on item 5? Yes.
This is a question to the selectmen. How much money have we spent on rescue since the first of the year, and how much money have they brought in since the first of the year?
Questions on expenditures and revenue for rescue for the first of the year? Would you like to answer that? Hang on, we're looking.
I don't have the exact number right in front of me, Chris, but last I had checked, we had expended $29,000, and we were looking at about Again, you gotta remember that you started with zero. You know, January 1st started with zero money. And that was the worst time of year to start with zero money. For this time of year, you're not heating the building, we're heating the building, we're paying personnel. Other things that we've done right now is to make stipend paid quarterly, not every month, to help kind of alleviate that. Very shortly, we're just waiting for that revenue to come in, that revenue to kick in. January was a decent month, February was not. And some internal things that need to be fixed. March was better, and April was fabulous. You know, April was getting back into what we should. So we should start seeing that money start flowing. Unfortunately, with ambulance billing, it takes 3-4 months before you get that in. But other issues within, determined within the department too, as far as paperwork, get people to fill out the paperwork correctly. If it's not filled out correctly, then it doesn't get billed. There's other issues there. So there are issues there that need to be identified and fixed, which are ongoing right now. Which will help that process.
Additional questions on item 5, referendum item 5. Yes, sir.
So you guys are saying we should put this $40,000 into it?
You should.
Is that what you guys
That's
are saying?
what we're requesting.
And you guys are saying we shouldn't?
4 of us voted against it.
I voted against it.
Additional questions or comments on item 5?
I'll comment as well as I could, because I would like to also state that I believe that a lot of those that have voted against it thought they voted down the enterprise account, and that's not what's happening. That's not, that was a separate vote within the select board. This is asking for subsidy. This is not for or against the enterprise. It's a totally different question.
Additional comments or questions? Yes, sir.
I just make a comment here. I think the issue is why it's somewhat contentious is that the rescue is supposed to be a non-taxpayer department, and this is us using $40,000 to pay them, and that's the part that drives the wedge between people. Some people don't want to give rescue any money, and some people do, and so that's what everybody's going to have to get their arms around. The bottom line is that there's a lot of mismanagement. What's done is done. They're trying to address it. They drew a line in the sand, but as Ben has mentioned, you don't start a business. I mean, they were automatically in the hole, and they got a $30,000 ambulance payment with no revenue. So they may have that revenue, but if you use all the revenue they have to pay the ambulance, you're still in the hole. So to give them a fighting chance, that's why there's this one-time subsidy. It's not an annual every year. This comes back next year, I probably would vote against it, because it's becoming an annual. But a one-shot deal, a shot in the arm, to get them up and running, to give them a little bit of space, that's why I voted in favor of it. And again, it has nothing to do with the enterprise account. That's a separate accounting question.
So the budget committee is split on that?
The budget committee is split. I think that's why you had 4 of us voted against it, and the others voted for it. You know what I'm saying? Is I think because, and I'm not speaking for those who voted against it, but that's my sense is where you're seeing some of the people. I mean, Chris is speaking for himself, so.
Yeah. Me, I voted against it because, like I said, they need a budget just like every other department. They are a town department. Just like the highway department, the fire department. Give them a budget to work off of. Put the ambulance payment in that budget, and then they know what they have to spend. Don't just give them a blank check like they've had in the past. Give them a budget, that's what they got. The money comes in, goes into the general fund, goes back to the town. That's my idea, that's why I voted no. I have nothing against the rescue, I think they do a great job. They do now. It's nothing personal against the rescue or anything with me. I just don't believe in giving them a Band-Aid to put on a problem that they've had for years.
Nancy?
Just to add what Chris said, I agree with that. Plus, we know the downfalls of an enterprise account. I have yet to have anybody tell me a plus side to going to this accounting system. We have all this oversight now that everybody's looking at all the rescue bills every month. I don't see a need for it.
Thompson.
I just wanted to comment. First off, what was voted in was an enterprise account based off revenue, not receivables. May have had the wording in it, I don't have it in front of me about, we would be then self-funded. Absolutely would. If you spent your revenue, you're self-funded, you're self-perpetuating, okay? But the propaganda that this has been fed to the people has been online and through other sources, not through the referendum question. So to constantly call it self-funded, 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 if it was being based off revenue, what you actually had in your hand, it will work. Again, it's just an accounting term. It's one of those things. But the other side of it I look at is, I might say a little harshly, I suppose, but to me it's irresponsible if you have revenue that can come in. If I had every department that have revenue, that helps lower your taxes. That keeps your taxes down. If we appropriate a budget on this, like every other department, and you have revenue coming in, the thought process on that side of it is that we put a budget, we make you pay for it up front, and then we'll if whatever revenue comes in, put it through the back door, and maybe that will lower your taxes next year. How often does that ever happen before it's overspent and expended again? If you have a department that actually can bring revenue in and support itself, that obviously makes more sense to me.
Additional questions or comments? Yes, ma'am, on question 5.
Betty Garrislow. I voted no because I do believe that they should be as accountable as every other department in town in the same way.
Okay.
They're still going to be accountable. Doesn't mean they're not accountable. It was mismanaged, misrun. Okay. Every department right now is being looked at. I have the full sheet. I know exactly where this town is as of Friday. So, I mean, anything that's pink is overexpended on that budget line. We don't vote by budget lines. It doesn't matter whether it's rescue or whether it's any other department. We're watching every line right now so we can identify the budget properly. Same thing for rescue.
Okay, we're starting to get repetitive, so I'm going to warn everybody we're going around the same circle here. Yes, ma'am.
Did you say something about something being illegal when you were talking before?
You're not allowed to put take taxpayer money, okay, and put it into an enterprise account without a vote of people. And that's what's been happening.
It has been happening,
That's
and
how we
that
got
is
there.
illegal.
That's how we got there.
And that's illegal?
I mean, it's the wrong word, but I mean, yeah, I don't want to get into that if it's wrong. I believe so, but yeah.
Are we looking into that? Is it that it was illegal?
Every applicant can look into it now. I can't get into any other details, but.
Other questions on item 5? Okay.
Looks like we spent our
Energy on that one. Item 6. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $121,258 for the operation, upkeep, and purchase of equipment and supplies for the Lebanon Fire Department and the Lebanon Fire Station? You can see the recommendations of the Selectmen and the Budget Committee below that. Are there comments or questions on item 6? Lebanon Fire? No questions or comments? Item 7, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to place in the capital reserve fund for the purpose of purchasing equipment for Lebanon Fire Department? The spending of any funds from the account requires the approval of the selectmen. And again, the recommendations are there. Are there questions on item 7? Yes, sir.
I voted against this item for one reason alone is because this account ends up being controlled by the selectmen and not by us taxpayers. So I actually have always been in favor of a capital account for fire equipment because over time we raise enough money where we can buy a fire truck when that's needed. We have a big pool of money to do that. So I'm in favor of that. But I'm not in favor of how this is worded because essentially we keep putting $50,000 into this account. 4 years down the road, there's $200,000 into it. Guess who decides where that money is spent? So we don't have a say. Okay? And so that's how this is worded. So I'm against that. Now, even if it's only for fire department, that's fine. But we still ought to have a say to where $200,000 gets spent. That's how I look at it. So that's why I voted against it. I'm all for the capital account for building up a pool of money so that when a fire truck comes down, like we have this one, that we're not hit with a big bill. So in 5 years and 10 years, when we have another fire truck that we need, we've got a pool of money that's sitting on $400,000. It makes it really easy for us to do it. But I think that ought to go to the voters to say, take X amount of money from the capital account and pay towards the fire truck. That's my view.
Other questions or comments on item 7? Yes, sir.
Dan Roy, I'm the Assistant Chief on the Fire Department. This $50,000 here is for equipment for the fire department. We already have $50,000 in that account. This is going to bring it up to $100,000 that we got approved. Now this equipment is at the relegation. The chief says we need to buy, like say, a set of jaws. And we need a new set of jaws, by the way. But then he goes to the selectmen and say, we need so much money, whether it's $25,000, $30,000 for this particular piece of equipment, can we have it? Then the selectmen say, yea or nay, and usually they'll say yes, because it is our money. To disagree with Chip over there, it's the fire chief, or the rescue chief, or Larry over here that runs their departments. They have to run their departments as they see fit, the best way they can. Should this $50,000 be brought to the townspeople for approval to get the JAWS? I don't think so. Okay, this should be the chief of the selectmen.
Other comments or questions on item 7? Wait a minute. Let's go here. Yes, ma'am. You're next. Yes.
I'm assuming that this account is covered by the same thing all accounts are, that any expenditure over $10,000 has to be approved by the people, right?
Question on expenditures over 10,000.
The actual wording on that approves it by the people. Not the referendum itself approves it by the people at this point in time.
But it's saying that the selectmen can decide what to spend, and I'm saying that we do have some kind of referendum that said that we can't spend anything over 10,000 without the approval of the voters. Is that correct?
Question is there another filter here, $10,000 expenditure over? Does anyone know the answer?
I see the difference between what you're saying, and I think that would be a question to put towards legal counsel.
Okay. So, gentlemen at the end, yes.
Again, I remember, if that 10,000 was in place, I might revise what I felt, but I was told that the 10,000 didn't apply to this 50,000, and that this 50,000, and so, but to put to your point is, why does the road, when it's coming out of the budget, have to buy a backhoe to be coming up, that's gonna come out of the budget? Why are they going to the voters? It's a department head. That's because that's what you do. If you need a JAWS of life, put it on your budget. That's what every budget does. Put it on there, let the people approve it. We approve the money, the taxpayers approve the money. That's the whole point. We don't necessarily approve what you buy, but you ought to know if you need a JAWS, put it on your budget. Don't just, gee, out of the blue, I need a JAWS of life. Hey, selectman, I have 50 grand to go buy it. That, again, this town has been run like that for a while, which has got some problems. So, that's why, and again, that account, if this approves, has 100,000 in there. Okay? You can buy a ton of hoses, whatever, but if you need hoses, put it on your budget. I think the people probably would vote for it. But I think, as far as when I voted for this initially, this 50,000, I thought this was like the big, major equipment that was going to be a couple $100,000, and we were slowly starting to put money away to pay for that. That's what I thought it was there for, and that's kind of how it was presented initially, not to be going out and buying fire hoses or other smaller equipment that you could use to dump into that. So again, that's how I was impressed. Maybe I read it wrong, but that's how I was led to believe that's what this capital equipment account is for, was for big purchases down the road, so that we didn't have to come to the taxpayers for a $400,000 bill. So, if you need a piece of equipment, put it on your budget and ask the people for it. I don't see a problem.
All right, we got several hands up here. You were next, please.
I distinctly remember the vote at the town meeting on the $10,000 issue. And it was a move, and it's probably 15 or 20 years ago now. And it was a move to require that any capital expenditures be voted for by written referendum rather than show of hands. And the point of that, as I remember in the discussion when we still had real town meetings, was to avoid personality influences on the vote for such things. On something like this, I think in 2014, for something as sophisticated and as expensive as road department equipment or fire department equipment, that it's just totally impractical to say you're going to put it before the town for every $10,001 expense. There's a lot of stuff I know about, but I've got no business voting on what fire equipment the department needs or not. And I have a feeling they can go through $10,000 real fast on a piece of needed equipment. And if they have to wait around for another town meeting, or if we have to pay for a special town meeting so that they can pay buy an engine jack or something, I don't think that makes any sense. I think that's hugely inefficient. And I agree, in reading this, my reading on it is, somebody else made the statement, this is the appropriation. This is the town appropriating this for fire department expense. And to me, I see the mention of the approval of the selectmen not as a mechanism to close the vote down, but to require additional approval beyond just the chief. So it would take the chief and the selectmen, not just the chief, to decide how to spend the money. And in that case, I think it's a control. But I think the idea of requiring full-blown town warrant article for each $10,000 appropriation is both inefficient and not what that warrant article said. Thank you.
Additional questions, Eric?
Eric Newberg, Deputy Fire Chief. I'd like to answer to Mr. Arlo's point about budgeting for these things. There is a certain amount of equipment and money in the budget each year for new equipment that is there. Sometimes it works out the nature of our business with breakdowns with the equipment and so on. We use what we can of that money every year to buy equipment. Fire equipment is expensive, and things like damage and jaws and things of that nature are very expensive. And I believe we're constrained at some level by state law, how much the budget can go up each year, and also definitely by the selectmen. We have to be responsible to taxpayers and stuff. And, we can only build so much into the budget for those types of things. So that's why I think why we came around to the equipment fund and a mechanism like that so that we can make these bigger purchases when we need to after money's accumulated.
Additional questions on item 7? Yes, sir.
Well, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just have this inherent distrust based on what's happened in the past of allowing anybody to control hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money. So that's really, whether I trust the current selectmen or not, is irregardless, because they're not going to be there forever. I actually trust the group here now. I have no problem with the group we have here. The problem is that if they don't spend it 3 years from now, I don't know who's going to be in office. And we've had problems with conflict. We don't have a conflict of interest policy. I don't know who's going to be in. So, we could have an assistant fire chief as a selectman, as all selectmen and department head. Right now, there's nothing to prevent that. You could run, both of you guys run, you've got the forum. But I'm just saying, right now, that's what's happening.
Right.
So that's why I have an inherent distrust. I have absolutely nothing against the fire department. I wish you'd put it on your budget, I'd vote in favor. So I have nothing there. It's just the way it's set up. I have distrust.
Right. Selectman Garrett. Selectman Garrett.
I just would like to say, I would like to say I have supported this for the past 2 years. Being in office, this is my 3rd year. As selectman, I've seen some huge expenditures. Correct me if I'm wrong, fire department, 4 trucks, 3 of them over 20, 23 years old. I've seen a $10,000 pump or something, pump, a lot of expenses for really old equipment that we've had a contingency fund. I know I'm not trying to skip to the next question, but I understand with the fire truck, we're going to have some expenses with that, should that pass. And maybe I'm misspeaking, but that's just what I wanted to say, is that there's been huge expenses in the past because 3 of the 4 trucks are 20, 23 years old.
Additional questions or comments on item 7? Thank you. Item 8. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate $61,736 annually for 7 years for a new fire truck? To authorize the selectmen to enter into a lease purchase agreement with the total cost being $432,152 over the term of the lease, with a $1 buyout at the end of the lease, for the purpose of replacing engine 1, the 1989 FMC pumper. You can see the votes. The selectmen recommend, the budget committee recommends. Comments or questions on item 8? Yes, sir.
This is the fifth year that we put this on the ballot, right? And we kind of held it, we held that price for those 5 years. Well, actually, probably the second and third year, it went up a little bit. But this price that we have right here, the total price of $432, $152, which includes all the interest payments and everything, we kind of kept it at 11. How long could we keep doing it? Can we do it again next year, the year after, if it doesn't pass? I do not know. The fire trucks are very expensive, right? They're just going to continue going up. This $61,000 is minuscule compared to having to pay the $432,000 right up front. It's a lot easier to grasp that than it is to grasp the total amount, and we keep this price.
Additional comments or questions on item 8? Yes, sir.
I'm Harrison, I'm a resident. This question
You
is
can
for
stand up, people can hear you better. Thank you.
This question is actually for the fire.
No, I want you to address me.
One bit like that now.
They can hear you better.
I'm just wondering with the 3 budget items on for the fire department, if it would be feasible for the fire department to forego the $50,000 capital fund expenditure appropriation and concentrate it and voters come together and vote for, of course, their operating budget of 131 and also fund the new fire truck. Would that be feasible? And I'm asking the fire department.
Question for the fire department on the 2 items that are before us. The chief wants to answer the question. Yes, sir.
We could do that, but it wouldn't help us any as far as the 50,000 is basically for equipment to replace the old equipment that's on engine one, put it on a new one. Take 30-year-old equipment and put it on a new truck. It isn't very feasible, and we need new equipment to do that. So I mean, 50,000 or better than 50,000 would be to go on that truck. On my take it.
Additional comments or questions on item 8? Yes, sir.
This is actually an advertisement. I understand there's a great PowerPoint that Skip has for this fire truck. It's going to be given
May 31st. May 31st.
May 31st is an informational meeting. So if you want more information on the fire truck, come to that meeting. You can see the PowerPoint.
Additional questions or comments on item 8? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure, but this would be the only vehicle that we would be under contract for the fire department at this time?
Question about other contracts that the fire department has. Yes.
Yes, that would be the only vehicle at this time. In 7 years after that one runs out, there might be another one. They just get older.
Additional comments on item 8? Yes, sir. Mr. Thompson.
I guess I'd just like to point out, I don't believe this was on the ballot last year. I went through and searched it, I may have missed it. I do not believe it was on the ballot last year. The last time it was on the ballot was 2012. And at that time, the cost was $375. So just to show, I mean, things aren't getting cheaper, we know that. Iron, aluminum, all these things, copper, are going through the roof. The more we put this off, the more expensive it's going to be.
Other questions or comments on item 8? Seeing none.
Let me follow up with that real quick, I'm sorry. You know, I just wanted to say too, at the time, the payment that we had done was for 5 years at $80,871. And now, you know, we've been able to figure that out to 7-year time at $61,000. So we're trying to keep it down to what it's.
Other comments or questions on item 8? Seeing none. Item 9. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,680 for fire hydrants in South Lebanon per contract? Other questions or comments about fire hydrants? Seeing none. Item 10. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $4,492 for the operation of the Emergency Management Agency? Questions about Emergency Management Agency? None. Item 11. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $51,165 to cover the cost of emergency dispatching for rescue and fire departments through the Sanford Dispatch and for radio tower rental? Comments or questions on item 11? Seeing none. Item 12, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $963,100 for summer and winter maintenance and repair of highways, plus State Department of Transportation revenues. And the recommendations are below. Highway maintenance. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Item 13. So the town of Lebanon authorizes the selectmen to enter into a lease agreement for the purchase of a backhoe to be used by the highway department with lease payments of $34,402.58 annually for 3 years for a total of $103,207.74 over the lease term, with an option to purchase for $1 at the end of the lease term, with payments to be expended from the highway budget. Selectmen's recommendation and budget committee recommendation is below. Comments or questions on item 13? Yes.
I voted yes for this because the town's spending a ton of money subcontracting work out. But when they went out to bid, there's like no procedure that's going to be in place with this machine. We asked who's going to run the machine. Nobody knows. We asked a bunch of questions. So I voted yes, but I hope the selectmen put a policy in place on who's going to be operating this machine. Me personally, the road commissioner is on salary. He should be the one operating this machine. So if it breaks, we don't have guys pointing fingers at each other that I didn't break it, he broke it. Or, I mean, it's a lot of money to spend for a machine. So one person should be responsible. And we were told about maybe sending people for training and stuff. My comment to that is you can send somebody, the town can spend $6,000 to train somebody. If you don't know how to operate a machine, you're not going to operate a machine. I don't care. You're born with it. I know. So you can have people get trained all you want on a machine. Another thing is a policy about who's going to be using it where. Like is it going to be at somebody's house on the weekend being used and stuff? This is stuff that the selectmen should put a policy in place before we buy this machine. It's a good idea because it'll save the town a ton of money, but they need to do their homework before we buy.
Additional comments or questions on item 13?
I have a question.
Let's go with it. It's like a topic first.
I will just speak to that. As far as policies, absolutely be policy put in place. You know, a large expenditure like this probably won't happen until the fall, you know. So there is some time to actually discuss and do it the right way.
Yes, ma'am. You have a question?
My name is Melanie Fulcher, and I live in Lebanon, but I'm not registered to vote in Lebanon, but I will be tomorrow. So we're going to get on. My question is this. You're going to spend $103,207.74 over the course of the lease term. That's it? No maintenance? Who are you going to pay to run this machine? Who's going to pay for the tires? Who's going to do the oil and greasing? How many drivers and people are you going to have running this piece of equipment? You're also running a piece of equipment that in today's age is almost obsolete. People are running excavators and small excavators because they're more efficient and do a better job. So we're going to go back to using a backhoe. When's the last time that a backhoe was used, truly used in this town? By anybody. You know, you list your subcontractors, you come up with a number of over $100,000. Who'd you pay that to, and over what period of time? You stated 1,500 hours. Who'd you pay that to, and over what period of time? Was it the one person? Was it the 10 people? Was it the 20 people? Who was it for? You haven't made that clear at all, and you're making it look like this is going to be a cut and dry deal.
Okay, we got a lot of questions here. Can anybody begin to answer those questions?
Well, for one thing, I'm the road commissioner, I'm probably going to be one of the people that would run the machine. The last time we used a rubber-tired backhoe was about a month ago. It was SDS backhoe. I had to go clean some culverts up. This loader backhoe would be used to load all the salt, sand in the winter, which we currently pay about $28,000 a year to load the salt, sand. We pay a loader to set up there. Every time he loads a load of material at the dump or at the transfer station, he gets $72. He gets an hour's pay. So So you're going to eliminate that. I'm not saying this is going to, it's secure all everything, but I mean, it's a start of trying to get some equipment and try to cut the cost down. If it doesn't work out, we can always stop after a year. I mean, the only way you're going to know is to try. So that's the best thing I can do.
Additional question? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Why can't you start with something that costs a lot less? Why don't you buy a one-ton?
One thing I don't
Costs a lot less money.
One thing I don't think of one ton, if the town was purchasing a truck, a one ton is not the way to go. You should purchase a 2 or a 2.5 ton truck, something that's more heavy duty than the last one.
Additional questions on item 13?
Yes, sir. She does bring up a good point. Where does the funds for the maintenance and the upkeep on this piece of equipment come from?
That's on my plate.
Anybody hear that? Maintenance on any equipment comes out of the highway budget and gets stated. And if you look at item 13, they expended from the highway budget. So that's where the maintenance comes from. Selectman Thompson has a question.
Did everybody that's asking the questions get this handout? Breaks it down actually to the number of hours, the exact number of hours that the excavator was used and the loader was used for this past current year, for the current cost, this is your actual number, have the complete breakdown exactly by every number for every transaction that happened, per excavator, per loader. You can follow this down through. We actually, is it probable to assume that within 5 years' time that the cost of paying an excavator or paying a loader will go up? Absolutely, has in the past. So, but to actually do this, I asked Matt as we were going through these numbers, let's keep that even. Let's say that we don't pay any more than $72 an hour. We don't pay more than $117. You know very well we will. However, down below, when you break it down to the new machine, let me back up. The two machines added together come to this past year, actual 925 hours. We actually rounded it off to 950 hours, paying the employee $13.50 an hour, which is what current road crew actually made. So we figured that in. You can look at that. We also figured in a 2% raise across the board. And it's going to happen, but it actually comes out that, let's just say that there was. There's no guarantee for anybody that's on the road crew. That we also figured in a FICA. We also figured in fuel at a 10% increase on fuel per year. We also figured insurance. We also figured in a 5% increase per year. We figured out maintenance, oil changes, filters, everything else with a 3% increase per year. You still, in your first year, after your payment of $34,402.58, save an estimated $27,017.45. Year 2, because your employees get a raise, it falls to $26,113 is your savings. Year 3, so you're still making a payment, it falls to $25,000 because we are giving that employee a raise. Year 4, the machine is paid off. You are saving an estimated $58,498. Year 5, $57,000. Total estimated savings within 5 years is $194,140.25.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that include your general liability and workers' comp insurance? Because you're going to pay $13.50 an hour individual to run over a $100,000 piece of equipment. And you're comfortable with that?
We know exactly what it is.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, thank you.
Makes sense.
Additional questions on item 13? Yes, sir.
I just have a comment. Like I said, what does the road commissioner make a week on salary?
Question, what the road commissioner salary is per week?
$688.
$688 that we're paying him, okay? During a storm, he sits up at the transfer station, answers the phone, okay? Put him in the backhoe loading the trucks. He can answer his cell phone while he's loading trucks, okay? This is my point. He's the road commissioner. When they're out putting in the culvert or something, he should be there watching what the job's being done. Put him in the seat of the backhoe, and you're paying him zero because he's already getting paid that. So you don't have to worry. He's already getting insurance and stuff. So that's not an expenditure plus what he's already getting paid. See what I'm saying? It's not $13.50. He's already getting paid that.
Wait. Let's get to the answer. We have a couple of selectmen that want to comment. Selectman Thompson first.
Well, and also just identify that you had mentioned
loading salt and sand, we expended $81,652. In my opinion, this will pay for itself.
Additional questions?
So you're gonna call the road commissioner on the phone that the town no longer covers?
What's that?
You're gonna call the road commissioner on the phone that the
Who's
town no longer
who are
covers?
you asking the question to? Let's get that. You're looking ahead.
Well, he's the one that
Ask me
said
the
it by
que-
phone call, so I asked you.
Ask me the question.
They're gonna be able to contact the road commissioner on the telephone that the town no longer offers to the road commissioner.
Okay, it's about whether the road commissioner has a telephone, I guess. One of the selectmen can answer that.
My cell phone, they turn the cell phones over to all the people in the town. We had the option whether to give the number to the town and take a $25 stipend a month. I took the $25 a month, my number's the same as it's always been for my cell phone, and it's gonna stay the same, and so it's accessible to the public.
Other questions on item 13? Thank you. Item 14, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $332,288 for the operation of the Lebanon Transfer Station? Recommendations from the Selectmen Budget Committee are below. Are there questions and comments on the transfer station? Yes, ma'am.
There seems to be 4 members of the budget committee that voted against this, and I'm just wondering why.
Question as to the Budget Committee members that voted against item 4. Would any of them like to address this issue?
I wouldn't know against it. I probably won't know against it. It's just the way it's, there's other ways to save the town money. And like I say, I've been on this budget committee for years, and my biggest complaint is we have commercial haulers hauling in there. They shouldn't be hauling in there. No towns around here allow commercial haulers to haul into their town. Me as a taxpayer, why am I paying a business? Really, we as taxpayers are subsidizing businesses to dump at our dump. And everybody brings it up that it's Lebanon trash. Well, other towns around us do the same thing. It's their trash, but they pay the tipping fees. Whoever has the business pays to transport the trash. So why am I paying for a commercial hauler to back into that can, fill that can up, then Waste Management comes, hauls that to Rochester? You know why? Because as a commercial hauler, he needs to get a hazmat license, he needs DOT numbers, he needs a medical card, it goes on, and that's a yearly thing. So it's more convenient if you just go up to the dump and dump your trash as a commercial hauler. You need a hazmat license because you don't know what's dumped in there. The thing is, well, if I go up there and dump something, I don't need a hazmat license. Yes, but I'm not a commercial hauler. Commercial haulers are responsible for the load they're hauling. That's why I voted no against this, and I'll vote no every year on this, for that simple reason. You figure out what it costs to empty that can every time. We couldn't figure it out, but just for an example, you figure it out, it's probably going to save the town probably $12,000 to $15,000. That's quite a bit of money to take off that budget, if commercial haulers weren't allowed in there. That's the main reason I vote no on it every year, because they shouldn't be allowed in there.
Additional questions or comments on item 14?
Me and you are going to go.
Waiting at somebody or Thank you.
I just have I guess it's a question, maybe it's the selectman, maybe it's the one who wants to answer it, but I think the 3 out of the last 4 weekends I've been up there, I've been behind a New Hampshire license plate, I've been behind the Massachusetts license plate, and then what actually took a cake was Texas. They're coming from Texas. As if the state wasn't big enough. I even think I even have a picture of the plate, but I don't know what procedure. I don't think they have a sticker. Because I even just registered my car and I forgot to get a sticker. So I can't believe they're giving stickers out to the Texas plates. I think they have 30 days to register, but I see nobody checking them. I see nothing. And why are we spending money dumping our taxpayer money, dumping other people's trash other than residents? That's my question.
Okay, the question is on solid waste. Did anyone answer the question? Ronnie, you want to take that?
The reason you see the Massachusetts plate and the New Hampshire plate residents that are at the cottage, and they have a card from the town office to come up there and dump. And we do go out and ask people, like especially in New Hampshire, we know somebody from Texas isn't coming up here and dumping their rubbish. That's a long drive to dump your rubbish. But the cars that come up and they have a card that comes from the town office that they're summer residents, we let them in. And this officer that we have in town has stopped a lot of New Hampshire cars coming in. Some of them have a sticker on their windshield with New Hampshire plate. How they got it, I don't know. But I went out and asked them to remove it. And some of them have registered. But that's why we have out-of-state plates that can be transfer station.
Additional questions on item 14? Yes?
Are the cards displayed in their windshield, or is that something you have to ask for?
On the dash.
Okay. I mean, I didn't see anybody look at the cars or the dashes. I'm right behind them, so I can kind of see. And I didn't see anybody checking, what I'm saying? Texas, maybe they do vacation here. It was kind of early. I mean, that was like a month ago, so I think the school's still in session. So I doubt it's a summer person, but whatever.
Also, Mr. Allen, also, when some people are coming in, we know they're regulars that are at the camp. We know them, so we don't run out and check their cards in that. But the others, they have it right on the dash.
Additional questions on item 14? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Alan Harris Howard. I go to the dump once a week. And except for last week, when Royce actually helped me put my trash in, I don't see anybody out there. So I'm not sure how you can catch those guys. Because I frankly do not see anybody that works there on a routine basis.
Other questions or comments? Ooh, we got a lot here, so yes, ma'am, you're first.
Okay. Military they do not have to change their license plates. So the 30-day rule does not apply. So they can be town residents, own a home, and have out-of-state license plates because they're military. So they could be from Texas. So the same.
Additional comments or questions? Yes, sir.
I got a comment. This really took the cake with me. I volunteered to help clean the rescue building out with 2 of my company trucks during a snowstorm in the morning. I had 4 guys help me. We loaded the trucks. One was my son, loaded his truck with a refrigerator, some cabinets, loaded with wooden stuff. My truck, they loaded the trash and stuff on it. We went to the dump. I called my son up. He went over to where you dump your wooden stuff, the wood debris, and the refrigerator and stuff. One of the town employees come out and asked him where he was coming from. My boy told him it's coming from the rescue building. Okay. Instead of helping my son unload the truck, he went over and sat in the block building while my son unloaded the truck. Okay? That really got me, and I went to the selectmen and I told them this. Why are we paying these guys up the dump when they're not even helping people? And I asked about the one that runs the dump, who's on salary, who wasn't even there, along with another employee. Okay? I went back and we got 2 more loads, and the same thing. That one time, they unloaded themselves. The refrigerator, cabinets, rugs, everything else by themselves. Nobody offered to help them. Yet we took our time, spent like 5 hours cleaning up the rescue building. So, really, who's in charge of the dump, watching what's going on up there? And they say they check license plates and stuff. I've never seen anybody out there come out and check stuff like that. I'm up there, like we did the roadside cleanup, the same thing. I volunteered the truck to clean up the trash on the side of the road. We went up there, it was 10:30 in the morning. The one that's on salary says he leaves at noontime. Well, it was 10:30 in the morning, me and my son went up to load the trash. Guess what? He wasn't there, and neither was the other employee that he's married to. So why are we paying him on salary when he isn't even there? 2 Saturdays that I went up there. I have a dumpster because I don't want to deal with what goes on up there, because I know what goes on.
Additional questions or comments? Ronnie?
I think the differ with you, Chris.
I know, Ron, you always differ with me.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same question you asked at the budget committee meeting. So let me tell you something. When you came up with that refrigerator to empty it, you can ask Paul. Somebody was there to help you unload that refrigerator.
Really?
And when you made those accusations, and I asked the help up there if they did help you, and they said, yeah.
Who was the help?
Oh, wait a minute. Let's not have a discussion. So we're talking about item 4. Here's what's happening. We're getting far around. It's getting to be personal conflict here. So let's talk about the article, which is a budget item. If anybody wants to address the budget, we're not doing that right now. Okay? Ronnie, do you want to say something more?
I just want to say that every year I get the same complaints from the same people, but I don't get any complaints from anybody else. And if the selectmen had anything to say to me and somebody was complaining, they would come up and see me.
Okay, so we're still on item 14. Yes, ma'am?
I have to agree with Alan. I go up there many times, and there's nobody ever there to help me. In fact, the last time I went, someone was stuffing a big couch into the hopper, and no one stopped them. And so I guess my question would be, how many people and who are supposed to be on staff, like on a Saturday or any day? Is there a certain number of people that are supposed to be there to help you? And how can we prove that they're there or not there?
Okay, additional questions on the folks that have been working at the dump. Ronnie, do you want to take this or somebody else? Yes, ma'am. Laura?
All I want to say is about the stickers. At the town office, we give out the stickers to people who register their vehicles in Maine. So how they get on New Hampshire vehicles, I have no idea. But we give it to them. We don't put it on their car, so whatever they do.
Additional comments or questions on item 14? Yes.
Well, I would say, I'd make a recommendation that the transfer station put the stickers on the vehicle themselves. They would know if it's registered in state, and they'll know that way they have the control of who gets a sticker and who doesn't.
Additional questions or comments on item 14? Yes, ma'am.
Has the thought of ever charging $5 a year for a dump sticker? And then you sit there and you have a log of everybody who has it?
So there's a question of whether we should charge
And then that
a
would
dump
offset
sticker
the
or not.
budget for it as well?
You're going to ask me the question and see if there's anybody that wants to answer that. Let's see. Okay, her question or her comment was, should we be charging like $5 for a dump sticker? So I guess that was a suggestion, right?
Well, it would give you a list of exactly who has it, and it would help offset the budget, and $5 really is nothing to you, what other towns charge for it.
Okay, additional comments or suggestions? Yes, ma'am.
I really don't think I got my question answered about who should be on and how many employees are there on a regular basis.
Okay, as I said at the beginning, some of these questions you may not get an answer to. If anybody's willing to answer the question about number of employees, who's supposed to help, the question was received. I don't see an answer forthcoming. Ben?
Well, I guess I'll comment that we're off subject. The question is about the budget. However, I like to take in as much as we possibly can. So, the budget committee might be over there, can discuss personnel or whatever, if they're advisory. We cannot. We're administration. However, what I do see is some questions here that maybe we need to have, obviously we need to have a conversation with the department head and identify some of these concerns and go from there. Other than that, those are personnel issues and they're not budgetary.
Additional comments on item 14? Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question on the dumpster. Anybody who's a property taxpayer is eligible for dumpster, right? People who live out of the lake, could be from Texas or East Overshoe somewhere, aren't they eligible for dumpster?
The question is, who's eligible for a dump sticker?
Well,
Laura, go ahead.
I'll just say that, we've had many conversations about this, and, if your car is registered in our town, you get a dump sticker. If you're a seasonal resident, you get a card. If you just moved to town, a different color card. If you just moved to town, you get a 30-day, you get 30 days to change your registration, so we'll give you a 30-day card, and you put, 30 days from then is when it expires. If you are like a military person, we give them a card too, because we don't give them a dump sticker, like if their car is registered out of town, we don't do that. And if you don't want a sticker on your vehicle, we have another color card that we can give to you, because some people where they work, like we had someone I think that worked at a prison or something, and they don't want people to know where they live, so that's why we give them cards. And some people just don't
Excellent. Item 14 has to do with the transfer station budget. Are there other comments or questions about that? Thank you. Item 15, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $22,199 to fund the no spray agreement with Central Maine Power? Comments or questions on item 15? Yes, ma'am. So we're on to item 15, Laura, just a minute. Go ahead.
I would like to go back to 14. What is that money for? Is it to pay the people that work there, or to pay to have the trash hauled away?
Okay, so we're still talking about referendum item 14, the transfer station budget. The question is, what is the money for?
It's for personnel. The bulk of it is for solid waste pickup. It's everything and anything to do with the transfer station. So personnel, solid waste. I can open the budget up and go through it for you if you want, the line stuff.
So it includes everything?
Everything.
Okay, see if we can move on to item 15 now. Laura, did I interrupt? You had something you were going to say?
Yes, I thought you were talking to me, but anyway, I just wanted to know, why is it double?
Double one. What are we talking about? Item 15?
Yeah, 50, isn't that what?
15, okay. So,
It has only been like 12,
okay, so shall the town, this is item 15 now we're talking about. The town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $22,199 to fund the no spray agreement with Central Maine Power. Laura's question is, why is it double? Ben?
Yeah, I've been all through this with CNP, talked to them several times. The situation was that the original contract, which you're referring to, we were paying like 11.5, and somewhere around there, looking to put it on about 12.5. We weren't sure what the cost was actually going to be until the work was done. Their contract was from 2007 to 2012, I believe it was. And we were paying 40% of the total cost of whatever it costs them to send somebody out there to do it. Okay, that has changed now. We went a couple of years here and got away with it, with them cutting it and still going for the same cost with no contract, which they could have reverted back to spraying according to the law. This was brought up as a question from the budget committee, so I'm glad it was a question. And then maybe they find out, hey, we got a contract. Once we did, what they do now with all their towns is we pay 100% of the difference between spray and cutting. So this is their estimate, $22,199, what it's going to cost per year. They will not be cutting, they used to cut one half the line, one side, and then cut every year. They won't be doing that, they'll be doing the whole line every year. But we need to appropriate every year.
Additional comments or questions on item 15? Yes, sir.
How did you take $12,500 out of the referendum street, though? Where did that money come from?
That is current year, all that is current year, this fiscal year, and they're not cutting this year.
Okay.
So all that money is available from CNP. It would just, go into the fund balance anyway, so that's money that can be reappropriated towards investment.
Other questions on item 15? Seeing none. Item 16, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $338,553 for government expenses for the town office, including selectmen and animal control officers. The recommendations from the selectmen are none, and the budget committee recommendations there. Are there comments or questions on item 16? Seeing none. Item 17, shall the town of Lebanon vote to pay the selectmen $12 per hour plus expenses. Are there comments or questions on item 17? Seeing none. Item 18, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $36,534 for the combined position of code enforcement officer / health officer / 911 director, which includes estimated mileage. Are there questions or comments about code enforcement, etc.? Seeing none. Item 19. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 for legal fees? Questions on legal fees? Comments? Seeing none. Item 20. Shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $80,000 for a contingency fund? Are there Questions or comments on item 20? Seeing none. Item 21, so the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $139,436 for all insurances for the town. Comments or questions on item 21, insurance? Seeing none. Referendum item 22, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 for general assistance for residents' needs? Item 22, general assistance. Comments or questions? Seeing none. Item 23, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,698 to support the following agencies? And there are a list there, the total. Comments or questions on item 23? Seeing none. Item 24, shall the town of Lebanon vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for updating of tax maps?